Did you know that if you drive with a loaded firearm in your car, you could be arrested, prosecuted, and even convicted, even though no one has seen you touch it?
If police find you with a loaded firearm in your car, they could charge you with a number of different possession of firearms offenses.
You could be charged with carrying a concealed firearm. You could be charged with carrying a loaded firearm. If you're not allowed to possess a gun because of a prior domestic violence or felony conviction, you could be charged with possession of a firearm by a felon or a person prohibited to carry a gun. These are really serious charges, and they could result in you spending a lot of time in jail or even in prison.
The district attorney can try to prove that you possessed the firearm in several different ways. Actual possession is where someone sees you with a firearm on your person. It's found in your waistband, it's found in your pocket, for example. Constructive possession means that they find the gun in a car or a house or an area that you are deemed to have dominion and control over.
But wait, what happens if I am in a car by myself? How do they know that somebody else didn't plant the gun in the car?
They would try to prove that you constructively possess the gun. So for example, they would look at, is the car that you're driving registered to you? Were there any other occupants in the car? Or is there proof that someone else was recently in the car? If there wasn't, they'll try to prove that the gun belonged to you because that is the most reasonable interpretation.
When we look at evidence in criminal cases, we need to remember there are two types of evidence: direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. I know this may not sound fair. If no one has seen you commit a crime, how can they charge you with it? But part of the reason why that happens is because of something called circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence is when someone can testify that they saw you with a gun. If there was another passenger, for example, who would testify that they saw you pull the gun out of your pocket or place it under the seat. Direct evidence is a witness testifying directly to a perceived act or event. By comparison, circumstantial evidence is indirect evidence. This is the kind of evidence that can be inferred. It's a conclusion that's inferred from the circumstances surrounding an event or an act. So for example, if you are alone in a car, the car is registered to your 86-year-old grandma. If you're nervous when the police stop the car and a gun is found right under your seat with your fingerprints on it, the government is likely going to try you for possession of that firearm, arguing that circumstantially you possessed it and circumstantially you knew that the gun was there. Now, what's really important to remember is that both direct and circumstantial evidence are equally admissible in criminal cases. That means that the government can try you and prosecute you for cases even when they don't have direct evidence that you committed that crime, and they can rely on indirect or circumstantial evidence only. Now, Sarah, let's say we have a client who is in a car alone with a firearm in it. What are some of the things that we could do to try and fight that case?
We would see if there's someone else that the client, whose contact information the client could provide us with. We would send an investigator to interview that person. If, for example, the gun belonged to that person and the client was unaware of the gun's presence in the car, we would call that person as a witness at trial to testify that it was my gun, I placed it there. Client would have had no idea it was present.
If the car, for example, doesn't belong to the client and the car has been borrowed by him without knowing who was in the car previously, that the person did not have knowledge that the gun was inside the car. One of the things that we look at first when we deal with these cases is the reason why the police actually stopped the car. If the reason for the stop is not in itself lawful, then anything found in a car can be excluded from evidence as a product of unlawful search. In conclusion, we want to give you some helpful tips for what to do if you get stopped by the police and you have a loaded firearm or a concealed firearm in a vehicle. Number one, never ever volunteer to the police that you have committed a crime, including possessing a firearm in a car. Number two, never ever give police officers permission to search your car. If you know that the gun is there and you don't give them permission, they may search your car unlawfully, and your lawyer can later bring a motion to exclude that gun from evidence. Number three, if you happen to be stopped by a police officer, if you didn't volunteer information, if you didn't consent to a search, after they find a gun and they try to question you, immediately invoke your Miranda rights. Please make sure to tell the officer you are invoking your right to remain silent and you will not submit to any questioning unless and until your attorney is present. And if you don't have an attorney, don't worry. They have to give you one at no cost for that purpose alone. If you happen to find yourself arrested for this crime, immediately consult an experienced attorney. You could have a really good issue that the police searched your car unlawfully. An experienced lawyer should be able to tell you whether or not there is a suppression motion that could result in a gun being dismissed if your property was searched unlawfully. Finally, you need to have a discussion with your attorney about some other alternatives if you don't think that you are going to prevail in this case. case. You might be able to settle this case for a lower charge, a misdemeanor. You might be able to get probation. You might be able to stay home on house arrest as opposed to serving your time in jail, especially if you're willing to consider participating in treatment programs, participating in educational programs that deal with how to properly store and transport your firearms, or mental health treatment. I hope you found this presentation helpful. Thank you very much for watching. I'm William Pernik. This is Sarah Schumacher, and this is brought to you by our new YouTube channel, Stay Out of Trouble Tuesday. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Please click like, subscribe, and leave us your comments or send us any questions you might have.